What's going on, everyone? Alex the Silva, and welcome to another episode. I have a very special and very dear friend and guest, Kev, come over and talk about his life and his incredible experience, around addiction. He's going to talk about, what happened to him in his past life, how he managed to completely transform his life and overcome addictions. And today his goal is to live an incredible life, and just keep working every single day to better himself. So Kev, welcome to the show, brother.
Thanks, mate. Cheers.
It's good to see you, man.
Yeah, man. It's good.
And do you know what? This is an amazing journey, because I remember meeting you the first time. I remember when I first saw you, and I've known you for over a year now, and I've seen your life just change completely, from that first day when you came into recovery, and just, then on. So do you know what? I'm just going to open up the room here for you to share your experience with everybody. Talk about, I guess, let's start from the beginning. I think that's the best place to start. Talk about you and what happened to you, and your addiction.
Okay, I suppose the easiest way for me to do this is, I always announce myself at meetings as hi, I'm Kev, I'm an addict, and for me that is true from a very early age, even though I didn't know that at the time. I could probably trace my addictive tendencies or precursors to addiction, as I understand them, probably back to 6 or 7 years old, to my very first memories. My story is a lot around fear. Obviously, I suppose I'm quite nervous now doing this sort of thing. But yeah, my whole life was absolutely intense fear. Nothing in comparison to what I'm feeling now. I remember very early on as a little boy being absolutely terrified of absolutely everything. I'd go to extreme lengths to try and avoid situations where I would be put with a lot of people. Very socially awkward, even around people who are my friends. I had some really good friends even from younger age. But I remember walking home from school, and my school was probably only 5-10 minutes away from my house, but I'd take a 20-30 minute walk home regularly to avoid my friends after school, because I know they'd ask me, are you coming round tonight? Are you coming out to play? And that would just, and for me, what it was going around someone's house. First of all, I'd have to be in someone else's environment with their parents maybe, and it just made me feel really awkward. I suppose my first kind of addictions, if you like, were, toys, massive Star Wars fan, I'm covered in Star Wars tattoos. And but what I would do is I would probably play addictively. So, from the second I got home from school all the way through till the evening, I wouldn't be the sort of kid that'd go out and play football, or if I did, I'd hate it.
Yeah.
And that progressed very quickly as soon as computer games came along, sort of like your Amiga 600s and all that sort of stuff. There's a game called Football Manager. Yeah. And I know lots of people know about Football Manager, but I would get up at school holidays. It took my school holidays. I would get up at 7 o'clock in the morning, put it on, and I'd be there till 11, 12 o'clock at night, or whenever I went to bed. And what I would do is, games like Call of Duty or any sort of games where you run around and blow stuff up was no good for me. Yeah. Because it didn't allow me to immerse myself in the story. Right. I would take Football Manager to a ridiculous level where I could almost pretend I was the manager, talk to the players while the game's loading and all that sort of stuff. Yeah. But back then it was just being a kid. I thought that's what other people did, and I assumed that everyone else felt as awkward as I did in all these sort of situations.
It's the fantasy, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's the thing. And it's funny, as soon as you said about, not playing those, shoot 'em up games, because you wanted to be immersed in the story, the first thing that popped into my head, and I've still got it there, is the GTA games. Yeah. Because it's a story, and it just goes on and on and on. And I remember exactly the same. I would just get completely immersed in the story of this gangster, you know what I mean? Until the point where it just took over.
Yeah, and it did. It absolutely took over. And, I think as you grow up, at a certain point, I realised that playing with action figures, was no longer cool. And you didn't get a chance to you couldn't talk about that in the playground, etc. but there was a common interest in Football Manager or whatever other games it would be, whether it be GTA or something like that. So that was kind of my first addiction. When I look back at it now, I believe it's a disease, and for me, I always suffered with that disease of feeling less than, and that's a massive thing for me. I very much struggled to feel a part of anything. In that, I always didn't feel I was good enough to be around people. I always felt very self-conscious, massive body issues from an early age, and even now, I know I spend a lot of time on my shirt off at the gym, but even now I've got massive body issues, and that all that sort of stuff bites away at me. I think from a very early age, I had a very active head, and my head took every opportunity to pick at me. And I suppose the substance abuse took off. It probably took off the second I picked up substance. And I remember loosely, I don't know how accurate my memories are, but 13, 14, started smoking weed, and I just assumed that I smoked weed like everyone else. But I do know that I used to take it home, and for the first time I smoked, I remember, even though I wasn't a daily smoker at the start, I would remember on a Monday that I'd be full of this fear and anxiety about what was going to happen Friday when we were meant to pick up. How much was we getting? Who was going to get it? Where were we going to meet? How much did I have to bring? Drug dealers traditionally are late. If you know anything about drug dealers, trust me, they are traditionally late. And I'd cluck. I'd have that horrible sense of fear and anxiety, waiting for this drug that, to be fair, I probably only used once. But it was instant. That I needed that something, and that something that I got was it was ease and comfort, I suppose, as I understand it today. It took the edge off. And I don't think it ever gave me what I was looking for. Weed, it was weed and pot was a lot of my thing. Didn't particularly like drinking at that age, although I did. I think I did that more because I was, it was a peer group type thing, and everyone else was doing it. And no one forced me to. No one held a gun to my head. I did that on my own free will. And I got, I suppose, like most young lads, I got pretty trashed pretty early on. Threw up a few times, but weed was something I could smoke and sort of kind of carry on like a normal existence. I could kind of do stuff. I remember even during my A-levels, I used to smoke between classes. I used to smoke heavily early on, very quickly. I'd always have it at home. And I noticed it became a problem, I suppose, if I'm honest. When I first started working at about 15, 16, or 16, 17, I would then get that feeling of what I now guess is withdrawal, when I couldn't just smoke as and when I wanted to. And I became really uneasy, I needed something else. Cocaine was always my drug of choice. If I had a drug of choice, if that makes sense. When I took cocaine, my life changed completely. I said that weed didn't give me perhaps what I wanted. Cocaine did. I was a child that feared social interaction. And even as an adult, I feared social interaction. I remember going out to the pubs at 17, 18. There used to be loads of us, down the local pub, which would be the Broadway in Letchworth, as it was then. And before we went, I was absolutely full of nerves every single week, because I'd be around another 20 or 30 blokes. And I suppose there's a lot of masculinity going on there. And,
a lot of egos. And,
absolutely. Because everyone's trying to vie for that sort of position. That's just how it was. No one was out of order in particular. But it just felt like I just never felt comfortable. I got caught up in the Britpop culture, the Oasis thing and all that sort of stuff. I got in there early, because I don't think at any point in my life I had an identity, because I was very much, if you told me something was cool, I'd just nod and say, yeah, that's cool, because I hadn't got the strength of character to say whether I agreed or disagreed with anything. That was just my journey. But then Oasis came along, and I felt like I had a direct line to Noel Gallagher, I suppose. When he said something, he was talking to me, because some of the stuff he said really made sense. And whilst I'd never be arrogant enough to blame anyone for my drug use, and I do remember, or my memory as it serves tells me that I heard an interview with him about, I think it was about on the Brit Awards, and I'm sure he was challenged about cocaine use, and he basically pointed to all these people in the room saying, you take it, and so do I, or something along those lines. And it kind of just broke down all those barriers that I set up. I never set out to be a junkie. I never set out to going to active addiction. It was, you know, in fact, I was adamantly against Class A drug use. You know, and I'd see people that were taking Class A and just think they were complete wasters.
Yeah.
And then, you know, then I heard this about, well, actually, it might be a bit cool to take coke, and I think within 7 days, I did my first line.
Yeah.
And and you know what? I remember the first time we did a line, there was 4 or 5 of us around someone's flat, and someone chopped it up. And I remember thinking, do you know what? That's not big enough. Bearing in mind that I've never ever experienced any form of Class A drug use.
Yeah.
How was I meant to know whether it was going to be good or bad or what it would do? But I remember thinking it was never enough. And to be fair, I suppose that's the only thing I was ever right about. You know, because it never was.
Yeah.
You know, that one line, when I took it, you know, it still gives me, I think we call it euphoric recall in recovery. And I think it's for anyone who understands that, you know, I still, you know, love the feeling of that first line. You know, there's, you know, I would love to tell you that my drug use was all terrible and, you know, and just say no, but it wasn't. You know, it gave me something that I couldn't have for myself. That first line changed me completely. It changed the way I was. All of a sudden, all those things that I could never do, you know, talking to girls, being around other people, I could do them. You know, instantly. And again, I didn't become a Class A drug user or a cocaine user instantly, daily. But the feeling was tenfold. You know, if we were picking up Friday, I desperately wanted to know when, what time, who. I would be there early. You know, I'd be clucking. And I remember straight away, I think about 2 or 3 weeks in, I'd buy my own one. I'd still get one to share with the other guys, but in case we got separated. Freddie had been out in lecture, there's probably 3 pubs at the time. So the chances of getting separated from your mates was pretty slim. But that, you know, that's the lie. That's the lie that my head told me. You know, just get one just in case. You know, and really, it was just an excuse so I could take more. And unfortunately, do you know what? For me, the way I interpret it, my head tells me that it was just I was good at it. You know, I was good at taking drugs. You know, we used to have people around my house. I'm sure Mum and Dad would kill me if they ever heard this, but they've heard worse, to be fair, in the last year. And we had a coffee table that was a fair size, and you know, some of the guys that I hung around with dealt, and they used to, I felt like a show pony. They'd rack up a line that was the width of the coffee table, and you know, it'd be like, go on, do that because I could, and other people wouldn't do that because I could take drugs to the extreme. You know, and to be fair, it was never enough. And I suppose cocaine provided me with this fake rock and roll lifestyle. You know, there's no parallels, is there? I'm living in a council house in Letchworth, driving a Renault Clio, and you know, I'm feeling like a rock and roll star because all of a sudden I can do whatever I never could before. And again, like I say, it was pretty much weekend usage like other people, but I know today that usage changed me. My career took off, you know, and I started doing very, very well at work. I worked in construction industry for, you know, big retailers. I became a manager very quickly, so I had access to a good amount of money. And then at some point, the weekend usage was not daily usage, it was a couple of times a week. And then the frequency of my going out as my crowd of friends changed. You know, I gravitated towards people like me. You know,
I think naturally we do, don't we? I think it's when we're in that kind of position, especially because you touched on, you know, how you were feeling, you know, with regards to that fear, you know, just feeling uncomfortable in social situations. You know, I remember exactly the same. I remember the first time I ever tried drugs, you know what I mean, or cocaine, should I say. So, you know, like you, I tried puff and stuff like that, but my mates would do it a couple of times and would always go too far. You know, I would always try to drink everyone under the table. For me, as you said, it was almost like a challenge. You know, it was a game to just want to, you know, outdo everyone. And it was the same thing, you know, the first time I did that first line, and I remember just thinking, that's not big enough. And also because he did me half a line and he did himself a fat line, and I went, mate, that is definitely not, that's not cool. Make it the same size, although I've never done it before. Previous to that, I was massively against it. All of a sudden, I'm an expert calling a shot saying that's not big enough, you know. And like you know, I needed it. Do you know what I mean? It was this thing. As soon as I knew, right, we're going out on Friday, we're going to get it, exactly that, I'd get myself, you know, an extra couple for me. Do you know what I mean? And then just make sure that, you know, we all had enough to share. But it's insane. Sorry, go on, carry on.
No, it is absolutely insane because you're right. You kind of reminded me. I can't remember a time where I went out to the pub and didn't have any. You know, and that's going back to sort of 17, 18 years old. You know, that's 20 years for me. You know, for 20 years, whilst my using wasn't destructive for 20 years. It was, it was insidiously creeping up on me, and because when I bought my house in Stevenage, I found a local pub, started playing in the pool team, and like I said, I surrounded myself with people who perhaps didn't use like me, but they used very similarly to me. And my assumption was that every time I went down a pub, someone would have it, so I had to have it. And to be fair, it made me feel comfortable around myself. And at some point, it started creeping into, I think it was to recover from the night before, because I still worked a high-pressure job, and I knew if I got up in first thing in the morning and perhaps finished off what I might have left, that tiny little bit I might have left before, it would just wake me up enough for work. I can't tell you at what point I crossed the line, and it was all day, every day. But I would probably say I used absolutely against my will for the last 10 years. I was at the point where I could not stop, whether I wanted to or not. Absolutely impossible for me to stop. I might have stopped for days, and it would have been days. And it got to the point where I used to not use on a Sunday for a period of time. And I used to be quite proud that I didn't use for a Sunday. Normal people listening to this will be horrified. Didn't use drugs for one day a week. Which sounds absolutely horrendous. Even to me, it sounds horrendous. But Sunday was the worst day of the week. And the reason it was the worst day of the week was because I had no substance in me to change the way I felt. So I was left with myself. I could talk to you all day long about my cocaine abuse and the crazy shit I've done for cocaine and where it took me to. But what I know today is that the problem was always with me, and it was always about my head and what my head would tell me, and how I reacted. And I don't know, perhaps my head is no different to a non-addict. Perhaps people feel and have these same emotions, but all I can tell you is I could not cope with them. And I didn't know I was using to change the way I felt. I know that in retrospect, from what I've learned in recovery. And for the time that I've had clean, thank God. But so it started creeping in, and I do remember starting to take some when I had a big meeting or a big presentation. And then,
is that like a confidence boost?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because I'd have to stand up in front of 20 or 30 other managers and do high level presentations. And I got to the point where I could take a lot of cocaine and no one would know. When I say I used against my will for 10 years, my wife, we're still together on paper, although I haven't seen each other for the time I've been in recovery. That was a consequence of my actions.
Of course.
I'll get to that in a bit. But, I used for probably best part of 4 years, every single day, and she didn't know. She had no idea. Because I can only talk about myself, but I was great at hiding it. I think my parents didn't know I had a problem. No one knew I had a problem. Perhaps the only people that knew I had a problem were drug dealers. Because they'd be getting £2,500, £3,000 a week out of me. That's
bloody hell.
It cost me. And when I came into recovery, it was a mess. It was an absolute disaster. We worked out that I probably spent over £250,000 in 2 years. We know that I spent over £90,000 in 9 months. And my usage wasn't always like that. That's a good thing, but I'm just saying that it escalated to a point where I could not stop at any point during the day. If I lasted 20 minutes not using towards the end, it was a horrendous experience for me, because I couldn't go 20 minutes without it. I'd sniff on the M25. I literally, cause I used to work in Hamworth towards the end, the end of my using. I'd have 2 grams on the way to work, that would be at 6:30, sometimes earlier, sometimes 5 o'clock in the morning. And the only way you can drive from Letchworth to Hamworth, which is sometimes 2 or 3 hours, and use, is to do it on the move. And I did, and I'm completely ashamed to say that, but it took me to some awful places. I could not stop. I'd use constantly all day, every day. I'd make up false meetings. I think my using turned dark, because I said earlier on, it was very much about the rock and roll lifestyle and having that confidence to go out and talk to girls and all that sort of stuff. I never felt like I had anyone to share that side of things with. And my nan was extremely close to me, and she was a really important person in my life. And she passed away when I was 28. And I think she was the only person that kind of just didn't get my truth, as it were, as in the whole truth. But we sort of skirted around issues that I had, and I felt like I had someone I could talk to who probably understood how I felt, because she sort of I think she emphasised, and she had some of those same sort of traits. You know, she'd have been a great addict.
Yeah.
You know, I can say that, you know, because I know a lot of addicts in recovery. And they're fantastic people, so that's a compliment, you know, in a way.
Yeah.
But when she went to pass away, you know, that was that hit me hard. The first person I've ever lost in my life.
Yeah.
You know, and I remember in my addiction, I was completely selfish.
Yeah.
You know, and I remember the day I found out she was going to pass away and we had a little bit of time left. My mum and dad came around the house where I lived, and they told me, and I remember getting them out of the house as quickly as possible because I knew that I was going to break. You know, and I hated showing emotion in front of people because I protected myself from that for such a long period of time. You know, you didn't show emotion in front of people, especially as a man. You know, that's not what happened.
Yeah.
And I got my mum and dad out the door, and I just broke down. You know, and I sobbed and I cried, and it felt like it was hours, but it probably wasn't. You know, and when I was exhausted from crying and sobbing, I remember laying on the floor. And do you know what I'd done? Is the only person I was sobbing and crying for wasn't for my nan that, you know, was going to pass away in a very short period of time. All I remember thinking was, how am I going to cope? Who am I going to talk to now? And I think that's kind of when I realised how selfish and, you know, how deep I'd become, because I knew that even at 26, this was 27, 28, you know, I knew even then that I had a serious problem. Even though I was probably not using in the quantities that I ended up in using nowhere near.
And was there? And I was just going to ask, because I mean, your story is incredible, you know. And the one thing I just wanted to know is, I'm kind of listening to you now, and I'm sure people who are listening as well will probably be wondering the same. Is like, was there any point, you know, as you're going through this madness? Because, you know, I've been asked this question before. Well, why can't you just stop? You know what I mean? Which is that kind of that obvious question. Why can't you just stop? I mean, I understand today why I can't just stop, and I understand why you can't just stop. You know, I understand that pattern of behavior now, and, you know, and the fact that the brain is here to protect us. Do you know what I mean? And what the brain's learn is that, you know, when we're feeling that emotional pain, distress, you know, discomfort, obsession, whatever it is we want to trigger it, what the brain turns around and remembers is, well, this is how you protect yourself. You know, this is what you do to self-medicate. So, you know, all the brain's telling us is, I understand, is the brain just turns around and says, well, look, this is what we do. So why don't you just go and do this? So was there at any point, you know, like when you're driving to work, you said you're like driving to work and you're kind of using on the go, and, you know, and you're married, and, you know, your wife knows nothing about it, your parents and, you know, your grandmother, you try to, I guess from how I listening is, you're almost like there is this pain in you where you're trying to grass yourself up, but it's just not there. Was there any point where you thought, I got to stop doing this?
Yeah, man. I wanted to stop for a long time. You know, I said earlier on, I used against my will for 10 years. You know, I think it all hit me around about the time that Nan passed away, because my drug use was then not so much social. It wasn't about going out and having a good time with that. You know, and back then I could justify it because I went out 4 or 5 times sometimes a week. You know, so it was like, because I'm going out, that's okay. Once Nan passed away, you know, it changed instantly. My drug use changed instantly, and I became someone who would sit in and drink 4 or 5 cans of beer, 4 or 5. That's ridiculous. It's more like 10, 11 and 12. Nice to know how I can still just draw it back in. No. So what I would do is I'd sit in and drink on my own with my wife, who would, you know, she'd be doing what she did and came home, and I'd be cooking the dinner, and I'd make excuses. And then I'd start using at home. Because if I drink, I use, and if I use, I drink. You know, I could use anywhere, but you give me a drink, I've got to use. And I knew it was wrong. And if I'm honest, I knew, you know, I think that day when I broke down, I think I knew that I couldn't stop. But the trouble is, for me, is, you know, and it might be cowardly, I don't know. It depends on people's perception, I suppose, and that's down to them. I could never ask for help, you know, and I suppose, to cut a long story short, my drug use escalated, and it was a slow burn for me. You know, how I survived the last 10 years, I have no idea, because no one knew. I did get caught once by my wife, probably about 4 years ago, and she told me point blank, you know, she pulled out every stop that she could, you know, bless her. You know, she said to me that, you know, what would your nan think? And, you know, these things really hurt me. fair play, because she should have used every tool she could, because she caught me using, and I said I wasn't. And, you know, she thought I was just using when I went out, but I was using at home. And she said, if you ever use again, I'm going to leave you. And when I told her that I was never going to do it, I desperately wanted it to be true. And I used again the next day.
Yeah.
Because I could not stop,
Yeah.
you know. But just perhaps so people can understand a little bit, I would still drive to work in the morning, and I would see people sitting on the side of the road with their cans of Skull, perhaps builders that are going to pick their picked up. And I used to think, you know, what scumbags? You know, I'm sniffing cocaine, driving along, and I used to be looking at people drinking cans of cider at 7 o'clock in the morning, thinking, you know, I'm never going to get like that. You know, because that's how my head worked. You know, and I was like, you know, perhaps in my foolish illusion, I could stop when I wanted. Yeah. But I couldn't. You know, and
but I think it's also, it's like we separate ourselves. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
We separate ourselves from other people. We although our self-esteem is rock bottom, the reason we started doing it is because we wanted to change. We wanted to get a bit of a booster, you know, in confidence. Yeah. So I think, you know, I remember for me the first time, you know, I just come out of another long-term relationship, which I again self-sabotaged, you know, and drinking wasn't doing anything anymore. So what I mean, I was kind of just drinking my sorrows, feeling sorry for myself. And when I saw people at a party talking, having fun, and it seemed as though, wow, this shit ain't that bad, really. You know, what's the big deal about it? Yeah. And then, you know, when I kind of started, it's that first high, isn't it? And we're then trying to chase that confidence. That it's almost like, you know, you get shown the confidence and then it disappears, and we're just trying to grasp for it, and, you know, just trying to grab onto it for dear life, you know, by just using more and more and more. And it's just insanity, man. That feeling of desperation, and, you know, and as you were saying about watching somebody else drinking, you know, a can of beer in the morning or whatever it is, and saying, what a fucking scumbag, not realizing that actually you're just as bad as he is. Do you know what I mean? I was just as bad as he is, you know, and we've come to realize now, I know that we both know this, that I remember even thinking, you know, when people used heroin or crack or stuff like that, I used to think, you're a fucking scumbag. Yeah. You are the scum of the earth. But there is no difference between a person that does and me. Do you know what I mean? I understand that today, you know.
It was only a matter of time, you know, and I know a lot of people are horrified by this, you know, when I say that if I'd have had heroin or crack around me at the point where cocaine was no longer available, I'd have taken it.
God, yeah.
Because I know, you know, I often flirted with the idea as the money was running out, because, you know, no one in my position can spend that sort of money and not have, I haven't got a count endless source, and I was having to do some awful things just to get that sort of money together. And I would have done it, definitely, you know. And for me, I mean, I know a little bit more about stuff today. I took overdose quantities every night for 4 years. You know, I took enough to kill myself by accident every night. You know, acute cocaine intoxication was a real possibility for me every night for 4 years.
What were you doing, like, in terms of amount? Do you remember? Or do you know?
Up to 12 grams a day.
Jesus.
Yeah. You know, and that's not, you know, a lot of people sort of look at you and think, well, that's impossible. Trust me, it's not. You know, what happened with me towards the back end of my using, I went off work with depression, which was nothing to do with depression. No. I know that now. You know, work were trying to get rid of me because I was, you know, if I'm honest, if we're honest, I was never there. And when I was there, I was just off my nut and trying to hold it together because it got worse, like I say. You know, and my cognitive function started to fall to pieces because you can't hold this life together for an infinite amount of time. You know, and when I look back at pictures of me now, I just think to myself, Jesus, how did no one notice? Because I looked like death when I came into recovery. But I suppose people hadn't seen it because of that gradual progression. And they just thought I looked like that because that's how it happened.
Life just took its toll, basically.
I had a hard life.
That's it.
But, you know, so I was off work. You know, imagine a drug addict that cannot stop sniffing and using, and perhaps the only thing that does stop him sniffing and using is when he's got his wife around, or when there's family around, or when he's at work. All of a sudden, I was home on my own every day. You know, with a drug dealer or several drug dealers, because I used to rotate them because I didn't want them thinking I had a problem. That's how bad my problem was. You know, who didn't work and live less than 2 minutes away. You know, he used to send me text messages if his daily routine would change.
Yeah.
Because if he was taking his kids swimming at such and such a time, he knew it would interfere with my usage. He prepped me at 7 o'clock in the morning.
Wow.
But it was all my doing, because I set these things up. I met people, and I built these relationships with people, so my using could be continued.
Yeah.
You know, they were just, I don't hold any negative thought to drug dealers. They were just doing whatever they do.
Well, it's not their fault, is there? I guess to a certain extent, because if you know, if we're to see it realistically, and you know this, we have to take responsibilities for our own actions.
Absolutely.
Do you see what I mean? They didn't turn around and tie you to a chair and pump you full of 12 grams every day, did they? Do you know what I mean? You made that decision, although, you know, I guess it kind of got to a point, as you said, you know, you were literally you had no control over it. Do you know what I mean? You couldn't stop doing it. And especially at that high dosage as well. I think if you were to just, you know, cut yourself out of it, you probably have a heart attack.
It was close.
Yeah.
I suppose the tail end of my story is that eventually I got caught. You know, I got caught by my wife, my strange wife. You know, a schoolboy error. I got caught by a text message on the phone for someone who's been doing this for 4 years. You know, completely in secret, sniffing the amount I would sniff, and getting away with it. You know, and oh man, it was awful. I don't share this that much often in the rooms, but do you know how powerless I was over cocaine, right? She caught me, and we were both in my car, and I dropped her off because we'd left her car somewhere else, and she was disgusted, and she called me some names, and it's the first time I've ever looked at anyone and looked in their eyes and they've given up on me. You know, I've seen her angry with me, you know, because I've done stuff that deserve to be angry with. I've never, ever seen anyone just give up on me. You know, and this is someone I spent 14 years with. You know, and that was it. Game over. She promised she'd leave me, and she did. And, you know, fair play to her, because if she hadn't, I probably would have died. She jumped in her own car and drove off. And do you know what I did? I didn't follow her. I didn't beg for forgiveness. The first thing I did was tip 2 grams of cocaine that I had in my pocket onto my iPhone and sniff them, because in case she checked when I got home. You know, my life is falling around my ears. And I can't really remember whether she came home that night or what happened, but I went to work the next morning, and thankfully I got sacked from a job that I'd taken on for the early part of the year. This was April in 2017, and I got released from my contract because they were really nice about it. They said I didn't really fit in with what the business was trying to do in the future. By this point, mate, I was in a terrible, terrible state. But you know what? Even then, I could not ask for help. I did tell my wife that I couldn't stop using, but that's only because I got caught red-handed. You know, and then I lose my job, and I'm still using because I don't know what else to do. And you know, you said earlier about changing the way we fit, and you know, that doing something to protect us. You know, now I'm in all sorts of pain. I know my marriage is over. I've lost my job. I remember I had 26 pence in my pocket, and she cancelled all the cards. You know, I've got credit card problems all over the place. You know, I went bankrupt and wrote off well over £100,000. You know, I already told you how much I've spent in the 9 months leading up to. I've remortgaged a house. I've done everything I possibly could to continue my using. And I still carried on, and I still couldn't ask for help because I just didn't know what to do. So the night before I came into recovery, I think it was the 6th and the 7th, suicide became a real viable option. You know, and I think for those 4 years that I used after I got caught the first time, I think if I'd have passed away in my sleep, I'd have taken that, because I used against my will for 10 years, but for the last 4 years it was absolute hell. You know, imagine, I know you don't say imagine, but you know, for other people, imagine waking up in the morning and the first thing you think about is, I'm not doing it today, I'm not doing it today, I'm not doing it today. And then within a minute or two, I'm doing it because I don't know how else to live my life. I can't do it. And then I used to time myself, right, I'm not going to do it for another 20 minutes, which sounds absolutely ludicrous. But I'd last 20 minutes and I'd be white knuckling, and, you know, I'd feel terrible and all these sorts of things. And, you know, I just absolutely could not stop. And I just didn't have anywhere else to go. So I remember sitting at home. I think that was the 7th of April, the very night before I came into recovery. We had horses, and we had some high-powered horse tranquilizers, not ketamine, but I think they're called ACPs. I remember counting them up and working out, well, these could put a 650 kilo horse out several times. So if I take all of these plus all this coke and all this booze, that'd be it. And that's the first time, it was close, really close. I just couldn't do it. Yeah. And I think to be fair, I just sniffed myself silly and drunk. And then it was the next morning, and I remember going back to the cupboard and opening the cupboard and looking at these pills. And when I'd often walk the corridors of the house because I just had all this energy and I was all absolutely off my nut and just nothing to do, just paranoia that someone was looking at me or someone was going to get me. And it was, So I desperately wanted to take my own life. And I know at that point that I couldn't resist my head. My head's telling me it's game over. I know that I'm on borrowed time because eventually the fear of taking my own life won't override the fact that my head's telling me that I need to do that to get out. So
was that like the darkest point for you? I think throughout the years that 20 years or so you were using. Did this kind of become like the darkest hour?
I think that came a few days after. My wife, who, like I say, we're no longer together. I haven't seen her for over a year. For around a year. The last thing she did for me was she got someone to take me to a 12-step fellowship. And I went into that 12-step fellowship and I was absolutely in bits. And what happened was, thankfully, my mum and dad flew home from holiday. They didn't know anything about this, poor parents that they were. They didn't know anything about this. They landed on the Sunday. I went to Cocaine Anonymous, which is the 12-step fellowship I mentioned, on the Saturday. And by Monday morning, I was back living with them because it was the right thing to do, because obviously I couldn't stay in the house anymore. And then I wasn't drinking and using all of a sudden because, one, I ran out of money. Two, I was under armed guard, because mum and dad wouldn't let me out. And fair play to me, because I'd have still gone and used. No matter, after all this has happened, no matter, I'm at the darkest place. Take drink and drugs away, and I've got to live with myself. And at this point, I'm dealing with the fact that I already didn't like myself anyway, and I haven't done since I was 7. So that's about 30 years of not liking yourself, and now I've got nothing to change the way I felt because I'm not drinking or using. Not to mention the fact I'm on a very steep detox. Didn't even know cocaine detox existed. Because I'd never stopped long enough to have one. And I thought I was going to die. And add to the fact that I thought I cannot live my life like this. So, had I had the opportunity in those first 5 or 6 days of recovery, as it were, or being abstinent, whichever you want to call it, if I'd have had the opportunity, I probably would have taken my life then. That was worse than the night I came for in recovery. The only difference was that when I went into recovery and had that guy that day, I realised that I wasn't on my own. Because from the age of 6 or 7, I didn't understand why no one else felt like I did. And that never changed. Because my interpretation of an addict was that heroin user, or that guy drinking a can of super tea at the side of the road at 7 o'clock in the morning. It wasn't me. Even at that point, I remember high flying job, doing well. You got the wife, and and horses, and listen. I remember working in the city, getting this job that was paying me more money that some people would earn in a year. I was earning in a month. Do you know what I mean? And I'm thinking, Jesus, man, like this is the high life. This is what I dreamed of. Kind of the paper dreams, the materialistic dream. I managed to get there from a boy basically that had a son at 17 and basically got kind of written off as a bit of a loser. You're not going to be anything now, because you're not going to go to uni, you're not going to do this, you're not going to do that. And I went, all right, I'll show you. So I got there and then went down that same route, and never thought, wouldn't admit to myself that I had an issue, like you, just would not admit to myself that I had an issue with, and it wasn't just drugs and alcohol, it was sex, it was relationships, it was food, it was pretty much anything I can get my hands on, and sometimes it will be, together at some point, you know what I mean? All of them. What did that happen with you? I know, because you mentioned, drugs and alcohol, were you cross addicting, I mean, when I do my bits and, I'm active in a 12-step fellowship, which means I still take part and I still help others as I can.
Yeah.
I say I'm an addict in everything I do.
Mm.
I've had fleeting issues with gambling. I've had fleeting issues with food. I suppose pornography. I suppose, again, it's the same. I just assumed that I was doing it like other people.
Yeah.
I've had issues with the gym and overtraining when I was in active addiction. And I would always look for something to fix me. I was the master of 1,000 hobbies that I never actually finished anything.
Yeah.
I've got probably every kind of martial arts suit and all that sort of stuff. I tried bodybuilding, horse riding, you name it. It was there was always something to fix me, and that's what it was. It was to fix me. So yeah, I would, anything that could change the way I felt, I would latch on to. I didn't realise it at the time. I suppose codependency. And that probably came out more so after my wife left me and after I wasn't using drink or drugs anymore. Giving up drink or drugs, I'm not going to say it's easy because it wasn't. It was a process that I had to follow, and I did. But once I'm left alone with me, and I'm still early in recovery, and I still really don't know much about myself because I've been using something to change the way I felt since I was 7. It's a scary thought. So I latched onto women. A woman will fix me. And everyone that looked at me smiled at me. I was just going to marry that person. That's just my truth. And that was hard because I got involved with someone, and it was only for a really short period of time, but it was so intense. And that person at the time was in a similar predicament to where I was at, and that's probably not the best way to go about things. Because I was still pretty broken. I might not have been drinking and using, but I was still pretty broken. I still had a lot of healing to do. And it's taken me probably only in the last couple of months I can actually sit with myself and say, do you know what, I'm not bothered about not having a girlfriend. As it stands at the moment. And it's not something I think about on a regular basis anymore. But early recovery, I had a cross addicted. I had a lot of tattoos done when I first came in. I think some of it was celebration times because I had a tattoo done at every clean date marker. So obviously we do 30, 60, 90 days, and I had a tattoo done for each of those. But again, I fell into that thought. I could have another one. I could have another one. I could have another one. I started training at the gym, and I did have to be careful with that because I would just go to the gym to train because it changed the way I felt. And it's
because it's hard though, isn't it? It's not easy. And one of the things you mentioned as well, which, by the way, we wouldn't recommend anyone doing it. Obviously, you didn't even know this yourself, but if you are struggling with drugs and alcohol, and you're in a similar position where Kev was, and you're using to the dosages that you were, get some professional help, right? Because detoxing. I think you were so lucky as well to literally go, because you went cold turkey, didn't you? You literally went cold turkey. From using for continuously, pretty much for 20 years, and then using 10, 12 grams a day. To just no alcohol, no drugs, cold turkey.
No substance.
And thank God you're here. Do you know what I mean? And to tell the story, and that's it. And that's the thing. It's such an incredible thing to be able to come out the other side. You know what I mean? Because
lucky to be alive.
Yeah, because there are so many people that don't. But I guess one of the things I want to mention is to, if you are in this position, and you are struggling, man or woman, get some professional help, because it's so important, isn't it? And there are a lot of, help there, and I'll post things on the website, and you guys can contact me as well. I'll, have the details at the end where I'll be more than happy to share any information and point you in the right direction of help. But definitely seek, help, because it's available, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. I think I had a sort of like a minor knowledge of the 12-step fellowships through TV and perhaps through the odd friend who might have mentioned it. But I never ever thought of reaching out to anyone. For me, I was so scared that I couldn't do it. Even at the end, I didn't reach out. I was kind of dropped into recovery, thank God. But now I've been around a little while. Yeah, there's loads of places that will help out.
Yeah.
Don't do what I did, because you said about the darkest time for me, when you've got no way of, when you just stop cold turkey like I stopped. Those first 5 days were horrendous, and I remember thinking that I was going to have a heart attack on day 5. you know, and I walked. I've got one of those stupid apps on my phone that tell you how far you walk.
Yeah.
I walked 7 miles around Mum and Dad's house. They live in a 3-bedroom council house in, you know, in Letchworth, so we're not talking like the grounds of Hampson Park or anything like that. It's, you know, but I could see the worst thing was I could see the look on my dad's face, you know, because he was left at home with me. My mum went to work. You know, it was just pure fear. Because he didn't know what to do, and neither did I, because my hands were going. I'm smoking 70 cigarettes a day at the time because I'm just chain smoking to replace as best I can that thing. I'm absolutely psychologically screwed because you can't take that amount of psychoactive substance without having, you know, I had issues anyway, you know, and, you know, all of a sudden stopping that thing, that self-medication, I was bonkers. Absolutely bonkers. I'd break down at the slightest thing because I didn't have anything to numb my emotions.
Yeah.
You know, and,
well, this is it. I guess it's almost like you switch yourself to kind of autopilot, and very quickly your body goes, mate, we didn't want this shit in the body anyway, so we're going to flush it out, and your body just gets rid of it, and all of a sudden you start to come back to life. You know what I mean? And it's a scary process.
Mate, I remember. I remember breaking down in tears one day looking at some flowers, just because I think I've been so numb for such a long period of time. We were driving somewhere, and it was literally just like the beauty of the world that I'd not seen in 20 years or whatever, and all this sort of stuff. And I think everything hit me, the realisation of all the things I'd done that I knew in the back of my mind were coming. You know, I knew that I was going to lose my wife, my house, and everything else, and my way of life. And, you know, and I knew that I'd hurt all these people, and, you know, and then I've got nothing to protect myself, so no drugs to protect myself from my feelings. And then all of a sudden the healing starts, and, you know, I'm not used to feeling happy. I'm not used to feeling angry because I didn't feel anything. You know, I was so even keel when everyone says, I just can't believe how calm you are when I'm in addiction, because I'm always off my face to a degree. No one knows I'm off my face, but I am. I'm always using, so I don't feel anything. So you know, I remember the first time I felt angry in recovery was about 2 or 3 months in, and someone did something, and I genuinely didn't know what to do with myself. Because I hadn't practiced dealing with these emotions for 20, 30 years. And I tell this to people who aren't addicts, and, you know, they feel angry all the time, and they don't have to. They don't have to put 12 grams of Charlie up there to deal with that. And I'm trying to explain to them, say, well, look, imagine having like something that you do every time you're angry, and it sorts it out, and all of a sudden not having that, and having to learn how to deal with it. You know, so bizarrely, it was like learning to live again. You know, and
take us through that journey, man, because, you know, I think it's, and you touched on this, and I'm a huge advocate. I mean, you know, we're a happy company anyway. Do you know what I mean? That's the point to our business, you know, and so for me, that's something that's so beautiful. You know, we've been in this together, and we have our journey together now, you know, where we're trying to kind of help as many people as possible. Do you know what I mean? You know, through this stuff, you know, but the most amazing thing that I found, like you, and this is the reason why I wanted to do this, was to show other men that the life that we think we should be living, you know, being macho, numbing our feelings and not talking about shit, you know, and not being vulnerable, and, like, you know, vulnerabilities, weakness, blah, blah, blah. And all these, you know, it's like cliches, you know, things that and to be honest, it's no one's fault. This is the thing. It's just how, it's what we've been taught, you know, throughout generations. You know, cavemen, do you know what I mean? You know, they were savages, do you know what I mean? You know, fight or flight. It was survival mode, you know, and I guess it's kind of stayed in that, you know, but I get, you know, as we've developed as human beings now, I think, you know, where mindfulness, meditation and stuff like that, and being able to have, you know, wellness, going to the gym, looking after yourself, so kind of healthy body, healthy mind, healthy spirit, these things seem to be more readily available now. So do you do anything like that? Do you have a practice, you know, something that you do on a daily basis?
Yes, I mean, my journey sort of to get better, if you like, started with a 12-step program. So that's, for those of you who don't know, that's I follow there's a book of Alcoholics Anonymous, which is the book that my 12-step fellowship chooses to use. And I was taken through the steps. There are 12 of them. I suppose to simplify it, there's a kind of recovery triangle that I kind of live by, and it's not interesting. You said healthy body, spirit, and mind. It's kind of around that sort of stuff, you know. Recovery forms the base of that triangle. So I do certain things every day that I have to do because that is what someone showed me and it works. You know, and I'm not prepared to put those bits down because there's too much to lose. For me, if I go back out and start using 12 grams again, which is what I would do because that's how my head tells me to roll, I'd probably kill myself. You know, I have no tolerance for cocaine today. To use 4 would probably kill me. And I would definitely do that. So I start my day off with gratitude, which is the best part of my day. So I get up first thing in the morning and I do what we call a grat list, and that is very simple. I just share with someone who is a sponsor, who's someone who helped me, and my mum and my dad and my little brother and my auntie. I send them 10 things that I'm grateful for. And it could be as simple as waking up alive, clean and sober. That's usually number one. It could be going out with friends. It could be going to the gym. And, you know, and if I've done something with someone, like I went to an ice hockey game on Sunday with a friend, I sent him that grat list because I thought it was nice that he knows that I had a good day partly because of him. So I do that. I do pray. Which I never ever thought I would confess live to the world. When I came into recovery, I was told to find a God of my own understanding. So whilst I believe in something larger than myself, because I can guarantee you that I'm not the most powerful thing on this planet, I've proved that for the last 27 years very successfully. I've practiced trying to control everything, and I've practiced trying to do stuff my way. And it just ended with a horrendous cocaine habit and a really unhappy person. So all I do is I kind of do a set prayer, which is in the book of Alcoholics Anonymous, although I do ad-lib a little bit. And all I do is I just ask for help today, because I suppose the Star Wars thing works really well. I am a Star Wars fan, like I said. The battle of good and evil. No one's beyond redemption. The sort of Jedi thing are based on Buddhist principles, and they're quite nice principles to live by. I'm not a Buddhist, I'm not a Jedi. So I just ask something bigger than me, whether it's nature. Don't know what it is, don't care, because it works. That's all I can say. 12 days in, I didn't need to use anymore because I started doing this stuff. So I do a little set prayer. Meditation I do a lot of. When I first came into recovery, it was absolutely essential, and I would do it regimented 3 times a day. I used an app that guided me through it because my head was so quick. I couldn't have 2 seconds of peace, let alone the minutes that I can get now quite easily. And it was practice, and I hear lots of people say about meditation that they've tried it and it doesn't work. And it took me probably 3 or 4 months of continuous 3 times a day before I started getting the benefits of it. Because people say, but I can't think of nothing, and I'm not. That's not what it's about. So I meditate. I kind of meditate most of the time, really. Even for a second. Just take myself back to how I breathe in.
Just mindfulness, isn't it? It's kind of practicing mindfulness and being present now, which is something I definitely wasn't. I was either fearing the past and regretting the past and living in that kind of continuous remorseful life. Whether I was cheating or had done something wrong or, stole something, whatever it might be, the night before, the week before, whatever, I'd be using based on that, stressing and then thinking, oh my God, in the future, is anyone going to find out? Am I going to be found out? What's going to happen to me? So on and so forth. And do you know what? To be present today, just to be here like now talking to you on a level, do you know what I mean? It's about hopefully one person that listens to this, gets something out of it, and they may be able to reach out to a friend and say, listen, I heard you're struggling, listen to this. It's this incredible ripple effect that life creates, that just allows us to be able to just be of service,
Yeah, and that's I said about that triangle. Service is one of the other sides. There's the recovery aspect, which is recovery is everything I have to do. The only other thing I do for a recovery aspect is I always review my day. with a view to, and it's so simple. Have I been nice to people today?
Yeah.
Have I done something, however small, that I shouldn't have done? Was I rude to someone? Was I impatient? Was I selfish? Because I've already touched on the fact that I was very selfish in my addiction, and that's not what I want to live my life today. And if I have done some of those things, I'll try and put it right as quick as possible.
Yeah.
I don't leave it to the end of the day. I try and do it as I go. But that's kind of how we do it. But service is another part of that triangle. And it started off as just service within the fellowship that I was doing things with, because that was, my primary concern at the time was to be clean and sober.
Of course.
But now I just try and be nice to people, which sounds, everyone's probably thinking, well, we all do that, but going out the way to, but going out the way to open doors for people, actively trying to be positive. I post something on Facebook pretty much 99 mornings out of 100, just saying have a great day, wishing people well, and I just try and do things that are positive. Yeah,
just an act of kindness.
Yeah, And it sounds simple, but for someone who was so self-absorbed, from that, my life revolved around getting up and working out when I was going to score, how I was going to score, all the way through the day to going to bed thinking I'm never doing this again, and then getting up and repeating the cycle. It's a big thing. And the last bit is unity. I think I said earlier on that after Nan passed away, I felt really alone. I was married at the time, and this is not, I don't know if my wife would ever hear this, but it was never her fault. She couldn't offer me what I needed, because I needed to be around people who were like me, and to understand that I wasn't alone, because no one got why I drank and used. Now I've got that, because I surround myself with people who are similar to me. And obviously we both take part in CrossFit. The similarities and the synergies between sort of a recovery lifestyle and a CrossFit lifestyle are amazing. It's
pretty similar, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. I don't know if any CrossFitters are listening to this, but you're all like addicts.
Yeah, you are. You're all addicts.
So I surround myself with communities, or be around people that are like me, and that's there's a lot of community spirit, a lot of events that we put on in recovery. There's I've only been doing CrossFit a short while. I've recently taken up boxing, and it's that same thing about surrounding yourself with like-minded people.
Sticking with the winners, isn't it?
Yeah, someone told me that when I came into recovery very early on. Stick with
the winners. Yeah, exactly. But this is the thing, isn't it? With life, I think it's not just with recovery. I'm learning that sticking with the winners is something that we should do regardless. It's something that we should do regardless. And I'm learning this, and practicing this all the time, man. I will not tolerate or have anyone in my life now that brings no value to me.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
I think now that I've, it's been a really steep learning curve for me, because I'm just over a year and a week clean and sober, and that's,
it's amazing.
Yeah, thank you, man.
Yeah, it's incredible.
It is for someone who can stop using 20 minutes.
12, and listen to this, 12 grams a day for 20 years. You go cold turkey, and now you're over a year clean and sober.
Yeah, and that includes no paracetamol, no aspirin. I don't take. That's just my choice, not
abstinence.
Yeah. I just because I also use paracetamol and aspirin in bizarre ways.
Yeah.
But I look at I do have people in my life that are positive, and I try not to judge people, but it's hard not to judge people. But I can see how other people let stuff off them. We live in a world where things are perpetuated from a very early age. You've got to grow up, and you've got to have this job. You've got to have 2.4 kids. You've got to have a house. Bizarrely, I'm the happiest I've ever been in my life. Thank you to my mum and dad. I live in a caravan out the front of their house. I've got a £500 car that doesn't have any windows that open, which in this heat's not that good. Yeah. I work in a job where I don't get paid a huge amount of money, and it's been a terrible winter for the profession that I'm now in. Yeah. So I've been pretty broke for the last few months. But at no point would I change my life today for what I had before, because my life is fantastic today.
But what does that teach you? And I think especially for people, listening, And this is the thing now. We are now in a society where it is all of that. It is chasing materialism. It is chasing money. And I did this. I'm guilty. You're guilty of doing this, of chasing, earning 10, 20 grand a month or whatever. Or even now, I hear, kids and I see this all over social media where before we would dream of being millionaires. Now it's the billionaire club. Now it's billions. People want to earn billions. And let's get real here. It's not going to happen this is the reason why it says the 2%ers. 98% of people in the world won't ever achieve that. No. Not because that they're incapable of doing it, because I personally believe that every single one of us is capable of doing anything.
Yeah.
Everything. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? You've proven that. What you've just told now, the story that you've just told proves yet again that anything in the world is possible. You can overcome anything. Remove addiction away from the conversation, and you stick depression, which I'm sure you would have suffered. Well, you got signed off from depression. Do you know what I mean? Yeah, exactly. You suffered from fear, anxiety, all of these things which, if we remove again the addictive label, every human being suffers from this. Yeah. You came out of your mum, I came out of mine. We start at one point and we finish at the end. Our emotions are exactly the same. How we feel, how we communicate, we eat, we drink, and we experience the same emotions, and it's just how we deal with them, and in life, I try to get this message across, as much as I can. And this is the reason why having you here, has been so great, because, I want to drive that message. Anything is possible. Everything. You can achieve anything, But my question was, sorry, and I digressed, was you had all of those things. You had the huge house, you had all the animals and horses, and, and you had this incredible job, which is high pressure job, and you were doing extremely well. As you described, you now live in a caravan in front of your mum's house. You've got, this little car that gets you from A to B. And, because of the job that you're currently doing at the moment, in the weather, because we are in the UK, it's 99%, unfortunately, not great, especially with the winter that we've had.
Yeah.
So from a materialistic perspective, you've been massively shortchanged. Yes. How do you feel?
I feel fantastic.
This is the thing, right?
That bit for me about waking up with gratitude is so important.
Yeah.
Because I look at people and, if you just take 2 minutes and have a look on social media, you'll see about people complaining about several aspects of their lives. And I'm not undermining their complaints, because that's their shit. But if something breaks on my car, I'm in a place today where I can just say, well, do you know what? That's how it is.
It is what it is.
There's I know you know about this, but there's a serenity prayer that about accepting what we cannot change, having the power to change the things we can, and the wisdom to know the difference. I spend a lot of time thinking, well, is this something I can affect? That's how I cope with stuff. You touched on a bit about not living in the past and the future. It took me a long time to get to the point where I didn't think about all the wrongs that I'd committed. I don't think about them daily anymore. That's not to say that I'm sweeping under the carpet. I'm well aware of what I've done.
Yeah.
And I'd be prepared to make amends to people I haven't. I do not fixate on the future. I'm not saying I don't have plans and I don't have goals, because I do.
We all should.
Absolutely. I've done so much in the last year. It's mad. It's not about an achievement list, but the things that I never ever thought I would do. If you'd have told me a year ago I'd run a half marathon, I've run more than one, but I'd run a half marathon, I'd have done competitions, I'd have got into a boxing ring with other boxers.
Because you're training for a competition as well, aren't you? Talk to us about it,
says he's sitting here with a black eye. So basically, part of my journey was always about, I was lucky enough that my friend who lived around the corner from my best friend at school, when he heard about me coming into recovery, he started getting me lifting weights with him once a week.
Yeah.
And then I started going to a HIIT class a couple of times a week with a load of amazing girls, and I started getting fit. And I found that applying the stuff I learned into recovery into physical challenges worked well for me.
It changes everything.
Yeah, I'm really good at and it's not a boast. I'm really good at going past the pain barrier.
Yeah.
I've done some quick 5K, quick 10K times, and then when running wasn't enough, other things started cropping up. So CrossFit, and then a friend of mine who I knew from school came up on Facebook. I hadn't spoken to him for ages, and it just seems to have fallen into place, which is how my life seems to be today. I kind of go with the flow. And he started doing a boxing class in the local gym, Elite in Hitchin, which is cool. And I went down there, and all of a sudden the conversation said, "Do you want to fight?" And it just felt right to say yes. So in 9 weeks, I've never done any kind of fighting, just say no. In 9 weeks, I'm going to be, I suppose if I'm good enough, I'm going to be up against someone who's at a similar level to me and doing something.
And is it going to be amateur, semi-pro, pro?
No. It's very basic. It's white collar.
White collar.
It'll be white collar, but there'll be people watching, and there'll be someone else standing there trying to punch me in the face.
Yeah.
But for someone who wouldn't go to the shops or walked home, for 20 minutes to avoid his friends, for me to get into a ring with 100, potentially a couple of hundred people watching me, to be punched in the face, and I almost wanted to justify that I'm not afraid about being punched in the face. It's not that for me. My fear is about not being as good as someone else. Fear of pain isn't so much of an issue as against being less than, because I fear that, and I've said that before. But so there's all these things now today. You should forget about all the other challenges. The fact that I can push myself, and we're talking about fear in that respect. I did my first sparring session on Sunday, last Thursday, and I got a right black eye. Yeah, proper one.
It looks great, by the way.
And it was sparring again last night, and it's the first time in a long while that I've had that level of fear.
Yeah,
because I went down to the gym, and it wasn't about getting hurt. It was knowing that I was going to be the worst person in there technically. Yeah, because these guys have been doing it years, and I've been doing it a week.
Yeah,
and I know rationally I should be able to justify myself in that way, but that fear was on me, and it was telling me to go and leave, and and that's how my head works. But I went there and I did it. I still got duffed up a little bit, and that's how it has to be. I've got a mechanism today to cope with that stuff. But I am going to get in the ring in hopefully sort of 9-10 weeks and just challenge myself. Just go up against someone else.
And that's what it's all about, isn't it? It's certainly, I know for you, and you've just said this, and you've proved continuously as well, that you can overcome those fears, and a lot of it is, ingrained, whether we've learned those from our parents, whether we learned those from our peers, or society, wherever we pick up, these learned behaviors, we pick them up. But the thing is, as quickly and as easily as we pick them up, we can retrain the brain to do the opposite. We can retrain the brain to say, actually, no, we can do this. The brain, and that's the beautiful thing. I love how the brain works and how the body just, turns around. The body never fights what, it just goes with it. And I think, and I love that aspect of, just really being able to challenge, and it's exactly what you've done, Yeah,
and I kind of try and reverse things on its head. Like sometimes if I'm doing a half marathon or a long run, I'll post that morning on Facebook so everyone that knows me can see that I'm going to do it. Yeah. Because that way my head will tell me from the second I start running or long before that you're going to fuck this up, you're not going to be able to do it, you're going to want to stop. And working with the people that I've worked with and training with the people that I've trained with, I know they experience the same thing. Yeah. And some people do stop because they feel like their head's telling me, I've got a reasonably good deadlift for my size. But my head always tells me, your back's going to go on this deadlift. It always does it. Yeah. And that's just how my head works. And, you talking about that learned behaviour. I tell people what I'm doing, and a lot of times people will say to me, be careful, you're doing too much. Yeah. I understand. I do understand that people care, but sometimes it's almost people haven't even had the opportunity to process the information before they say, you're doing too much. Yeah. And that's a learned response. Yeah.
But again, it's, other people's fears get passed down, Yeah. And this is the thing, then, you know what? And it's absolutely okay. You can do whatever you like, as long as you stay in your lane, let me stay in mine, let me do me, and that's what I was saying before about, getting to this point in my life now where confidence was a huge thing for me. had no confidence. I would come across as though I did, and I would put the brave face on, but inside, man, I'd be dying. Now that I've kind of overcome this stuff, and I continue to work on myself every day, and now have the opportunity to help people, it's incredible, this journey that I put myself through of, just challenging myself all the time, trying to grow mentally, physically, spiritually, all the time, just trying to do something better every day. And because I've learned is that, we were born limitless. We can do anything. And we proved that when we were born, because we learned, we're like lying there in little vegetables, not really doing much, just eating and pooping basically when we're babies. So all of a sudden, look at us, we're grown men sitting here, getting vulnerable, talking and speaking. So who says you can't do it?
I believe we are limitless. If you'd have asked me a year ago, I would have written off anything I did before it started.
Yeah.
I was great for that.
Yeah.
That will never work. If I want to do something today, if I feel it's right, because I do go with a bit of meditation about, if something feels right, I'll probably have a go at it.
Yeah.
Whereas before I put blockers in the way.
Yeah.
If you'd have told me about running a half marathon, I'd have told you I couldn't do that. Today, if you tell me, there's a challenge that we're looking at doing. We're looking at doing the Pen 10, which is 10 times up and down that mountain in 24 hours, 40 miles.
Yeah.
Only 8% of people make it.
Yeah.
I'm not scared about that at all.
Why not?
Because
man,
I just feel like I'm going to do it.
Yeah. It's another thing to add to the life list, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah.
That's the thing, and that's what life is it's all about, Where do you get your passion from?
Where do I get my passion from? I suppose the gratitude that I have towards life in general today drives that.
Yeah.
I do wake up every day. I am very grateful just to be alive, just to be clean and sober, and everything else. I know there's loads of cliches about grasping every minute and all that sort of fuzzy shit, but I do. I've got.
It's there for a reason, isn't it?
I wasted a lot of time in active addiction, not being able to enjoy the things around me. So I do stuff that I love today. I've still got responsibilities. I've still got to work like most people have.
Yeah.
But the things that I like doing, that's what drives me.
Yeah.
And I love being. I suppose I love being around like-minded people.
Yeah.
Just want to be happy, and that's how I get that happiness.
Yeah. Excellent. So, how would you like to be remembered?
What I said. I think. Do you know what? There's a quality saying that I use quite a bit, and it's around the fact that what people think of me is none of my business. And I use that a lot because part of my fear has always been about people pleasing and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
I get up every morning and I genuinely do what I feel is the right thing to do. If I affect someone, whether it's doing this interview, I know I've already affected someone whose life is 100 times better today than it was, because they were in a similar situation when we were drinking and using. And through social media, they came into recovery. They attribute in my social media and me with saving their life. That's cool, man.
Yeah, man.
That's how I want to be remembered, I suppose. Someone who helped someone else out. I'm not bothered about if people remember me sort of, okay, he was the one who did this, but as long as I can have a positive impact on someone's life, that's good enough for me.
Add to that ripple effect, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. It's it could just be making someone smile every day.
Yeah.
That's
yeah. And you know what? The thing is, you do, because you post on social media, as you said, every day, and there is always people who either comment or react to the post, and then it's every time it's it's in a positive way, and that in itself can make such a difference to someone's day. Commuting to work, something's gone wrong or whatever, and then they're kind of scrolling through Facebook and they see your message there, and it's that instant thing, isn't it? Just saying that to someone, or even just thinking about it now, have an amazing day.
Cool.
Just doesn't, do you know what I mean? It doesn't even you just it's an instant thing that makes your brain goes, it doesn't matter who you are.
Yeah.
You know, it really does trigger. Even, you know, I know people who hide it and say, "Oh, I have no emotions." You're lying.
Yeah,
You are lying. You know, everybody feels, everybody experiences. You know, and that's the beautiful thing about life is that, you know, as soon as we start, or the sooner we start, you know, understanding that, you know, the suffering that we live in, not just from addiction, just kind of generally in life, you know, chasing all of these things that a lot of the times we just get pushed into doing because of how society dictates it. As soon as we start taking a step back from that and stop doing things for everybody else and start looking at what we really want to do in life, that's when we start taking those steps forward to having that beautiful life. Do you know what I mean? That you're so grateful for, that I'm so grateful for every day.
Yeah.
You know, it makes such a huge difference, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think, do you know what, it's so nice. I mean, social media is massive, isn't it? You know, I've got my Facebook has, the number of friends I've got now has tripled since I've come into recovery. And a lot of people are recovery based. And,
Yeah.
you know, I get that, but I'll do those positive messages, and every day I'll see someone that I've never seen before, as in liking or sharing a post, and they'll do something.
Yeah.
So I know that, you know, that bit about, you know, how do I want to be remembered? I suppose it's just someone who would have a positive impact overall.
Yeah.
You know, and it's so easy to do in that respect. You know, I'm not trying to go out and save people's lives every single day. You know, just trying to do what I believe in every day.
Awesome. Final one from me. Yeah. If you could have a superpower, what would it be, and how would you use it to help change the world?
Yeah, I remember. Yeah, that was actually quite a hard question to answer. But I think if I could slow down time, in the fact just purely so I could get more stuff done in the day. You know, that's that would be it, because my life is really full. You know, I've gone from someone who's you know, didn't do anything to literally cramming so much into life. You know, and, you know, spending time with friends, going to the gym, all those sorts of things, helping people. You know, I don't have a telly in my caravan. I don't have the opportunity to sit and watch telly because that's my choice. And yeah, man, my life's mental. If I could slow down time a little bit, just so I could get a little bit more in every day, that'd be cool.
Add a couple of hours.
That's right. Yeah. That'd be it. Yeah. Other than that,
because aren't you studying to be a personal trainer as well?
Yes. Yeah. I'm studying to be a personal trainer. That's kind of. I realised pretty quickly that I wanted to help people. Yeah. I didn't want to work in recovery so much, because I do that in my own time free. Yeah. You know, I help anyone that wants help with addiction free of charge, as someone did for me. Yeah. But I've seen people's faces light up when they hit a personal best, or when they've taken their first few steps, when I've been around them training, and I thought, how cool would that be to do that? So I am studying to be a personal trainer. Yeah. And that is what I should do. Awesome, man. Because we are limitless. Yeah, brother. Man, I wish it all continues. Thank you so much for coming down. No, pleasure. Thank you very much for having me.